Around 2.4 million years ago, one of the most important chapters in the story of prehistoric humans may have begun not with a triumph, but with a struggle to survive. Homo habilis lived in a world where a single mistake could mean death. So what allowed this fragile ancestor to endure? Or did the relentless pressure of survival itself shape humanity's very first breakthrough? Imagine an ordinary morning in East Africa, nearly 2.5 million years ago. As the first light spreads across the landscape, a small group of Homo habilis quietly leaves the safety of the trees. There is no certainty that they will find food before the day ends. Every movement demands caution. Every unfamiliar sound forces them to stop, listen, and decide whether to move forward or turn back. Unlike the great predators that ruled these grasslands, Homo habilis could not rely on strength. They were not the fastest runners. They had no claws to defend themselves and no powerful jaws to challenge larger animals. Even finding enough food before sunset was never guaranteed. By the end of the day, success was measured by something remarkably simple. If every member of the group returned alive, it had been a good day. At first glance, nothing about Homo habilis suggests a species destined to leave a lasting mark on Earth's history. Standing roughly 1.3 to 1.5 meters tall and weighing only around 30 to 45 kilograms, they were small even by the standards of their own time. Their brain measured approximately 510 to 700 cubic centimeters. Larger than earlier Australopithecines, yet only about half the average size of a modern human brain. Their face still projected forward, their forehead remained low, and many features connected them closely to older human relatives rather than to ourselves. For decades, paleoanthropologists have regarded Homo habilis as one of the earliest recognized members of the genus Homo. Fossils discovered at sites such as Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania and Kubi Fora in Kenya suggest they appeared around 2.4 million years ago, during a period when East Africa was becoming increasingly unpredictable. They were not the dominant species in their environment. They were simply one more small primate trying to survive among far larger and better equipped competitors. That raises an extraordinary question. If Homo habilis possessed so few obvious advantages, why did they persist for nearly 1,000,000 years while countless other species disappeared? What allowed such an unremarkable-looking hominin to become one of the earliest and most important prehistoric humans in our evolutionary story? To answer that question, we first need to understand the world Homo habilis was struggling to survive in. And that world was changing in ways that would reshape the future of human evolution. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover the fascinating mysteries of prehistoric Earth. Now, back to our story. For generations, groups of Homo habilis likely followed the same paths between scattered trees, returned to familiar feeding areas, and depended on water sources that had sustained life for countless seasons. Those places shaped the routines that made survival possible. But the landscape was slowly rewriting itself. A grove of trees gradually disappeared. A seasonal stream dried into cracked earth. A lake that had attracted animals year after year slowly shrank until it was gone. No single generation would have witnessed the entire transformation. Instead, each inherited an environment that had become just a little less predictable than before. By the time Homo habilis appeared around 2.4 million years ago, East Africa was already entering a period of profound environmental change. As the transition from the Pliocene to the Pleistocene unfolded, the East African rift system continued reshaping the region. Rivers changed course, new basins formed, rainfall patterns shifted, and forests gradually gave way to expanding woodlands and grasslands. For Homo habilis, these geological changes were not distant events. They altered everyday life. Familiar travel routes no longer led to the same resources. Animals followed changing vegetation into new areas, forcing early hominins to search farther and adapt to unfamiliar conditions. Geological evidence from ancient lake sediments, fossil pollen, volcanic ash, and stable isotope records shows that these environmental changes occurred repeatedly across East Africa over tens of thousands of years. Rather than evolving in a stable habitat, Homo habilis lived in a landscape that rarely remained the same for long. Paleoanthropologist Rick Potts proposed that this kind of instability may have played a key role in the evolution of prehistoric humans through what is known as the variability selection hypothesis. Instead of consistently favoring the strongest or the fastest individuals, constantly changing environments may have rewarded those able to adjust their behavior whenever conditions shifted. For Homo habilis, the greatest challenge was not surviving a single drought or avoiding a single predator. It was adapting to a world where the rules never stayed the same. However, despite this instability, this small human species survived for nearly 1,000,000 years. So what allowed Homo habilis to survive when the environment itself never stopped changing? East Africa had become a landscape that rarely stayed the same. But no matter how unpredictable the world became, survival ultimately depended on one thing: the body each species brought into that changing environment. And that leads to another question. If you looked only at the body of Homo habilis, would you ever expect this species to survive for nearly 1 million years? At first glance, the answer would probably be no. In nature, most animals are shaped by millions of years of evolution for a particular way of life. A cheetah is built to sprint across open plains. A baboon spends much of its life confidently on the ground. Chimpanzees remain remarkably adapted for climbing through the forest canopy. Each species follows a strategy refined by its environment. Homo habilis, however, seems to follow none of these strategies completely. Instead, its body appears caught between two different worlds, and that may be one of the most revealing clues to understanding how it struggled to survive. When paleoanthropologists study the skeleton of Homo habilis, they do not see a body that has already reached its final design. They see evidence of a long transition still unfolding. The lower body tells one story. The hips, legs, and feet show continued adaptation for walking efficiently on two legs, allowing longer journeys across woodland and open ground than earlier hominins. Yet the upper body tells another. The relatively long arms, the mobile shoulder joints, and the curved fingers all preserve characteristics that remained useful for climbing. Rather than replacing one lifestyle with another, evolution appears to have combined both within the same individual. This combination was probably reflected in everyday life. During daylight, Homo habilis could travel across the ground, moving between scattered food sources and isolated patches of woodland. But when daylight faded, the safest option may still have been to climb back into the trees. High branches offered elevated sleeping places and reduced exposure to many ground-dwelling predators. Their lives were therefore divided between two environments. They no longer depended entirely on forests, yet they had not fully committed to life on the open savanna either. Scientists describe this pattern as mosaic evolution. Evolution does not transform every part of the body at the same pace. Different anatomical features respond to different selective pressures, often changing independently over hundreds of thousands of years. Homo habilis provides one of the clearest examples of this process. While adaptations for upright walking continued to develop, traits inherited from earlier tree-climbing ancestors remained because they still served an important purpose. result was neither a primitive ape nor a fully modern human ancestor, but a transitional hominin carrying adaptations from both stages of its evolutionary history. Homo habilis was no longer perfectly suited to life in the trees, yet it had not acquired all the anatomical advantages that later members of the genus Homo would use to thrive on the ground. In many ways, it was living through an evolutionary experiment while the environment around it continued to change. And if anatomy alone could not explain how Homo habilis endured for nearly 1 million years, then the answer must lie somewhere beyond the body itself. That is exactly where the next part of the story begins. If the body of Homo habilis was still adapting to a changing world, then every weakness carried a price. The question was no longer whether danger existed. It was where it would come from next. What was the greatest threat facing Homo habilis? Perhaps the answer is simpler than we imagine. It was almost everything around them. Picture a small group moving cautiously across the edge of a woodland shortly after sunrise. They stop frequently, not because they have already found food, but because every unfamiliar sound demands attention. A rustle in the grass could be nothing more than the wind, or it could be the difference between returning home together and leaving one member behind. Long before Homo habilis learned to shape the world around them, they first had to survive a world that was constantly watching them. Unlike later human species, Homo habilis occupied no dominant position within their ecosystem. They were neither the largest animals nor the fastest. They lacked the physical advantages that allowed many mammals to escape danger or confront it directly. In ecological terms, they occupied a position much closer to the middle of the food web than the top. That meant danger arrived from many directions. Among the most dangerous predators sharing this landscape was Dinofelis, a powerful saber-toothed cat that thrived in woodlands and along forest edges. Unlike animals built for long pursuits, Dinofelis relied on patience. It could remain hidden among dense vegetation, waiting until prey wandered within reach before launching a sudden attack. For a small group of Homo habilis moving cautiously between patches of woodland, the greatest danger was often the one they never saw. A few careless steps into thick cover could place them within striking distance before there was any chance to react. But remaining in more open country offered no guarantee of safety. Megar, another saber-toothed cat living across parts of Africa during this period, represented a different kind of challenge. With exceptionally powerful forelimbs and long upper canine teeth, it was capable of bringing down animals much larger than itself. Although scientists continue to debate how frequently early hominins appeared in its diet, a lone or isolated Homo habilis would have been far more vulnerable than larger herd animals able to defend one another. Simply becoming separated from the group may have dramatically increased the risk of never returning. Danger also came from predators that hunted very differently. Chasmoporthetes, an early cursorial hyena, was adapted for long-distance endurance. Longer legs allowed it to cover large distances across open landscapes, following migrating herbivores and searching widely for feeding opportunities. Unlike a hidden cat waiting in silence, Chasmoporthetes could appear almost anywhere. Direct evidence of frequent encounters between Chasmoporthetes and Homo habilis remains limited. However, they likely crossed paths at carcasses left behind by larger predators. If both were drawn to the same source of meat, competition for those valuable resources may have increased the risk of dangerous encounters. For Homo habilis, there was no single safe habitat. Woodland concealed ambush predators, while open ground exposed them to carnivores capable of traveling across vast areas. Even reaching water carried its own risks. Rivers and lakes were essential gathering places for drinking, cooling down, and attracting animals. They were also places that Homo habilis had little choice but to visit in order to survive. Yet those same locations were also home to ancient crocodiles. These predators did not need to chase prey across long distances. They depended on stillness, nearly invisible beneath the surface. They waited until an animal approached the shoreline before striking with astonishing speed. Fossil evidence from Olduvai Gorge even preserves tooth marks attributed to crocodile feeding on an early member of the genus Homo. This further strengthens the evidence that Homo habilis lived under the constant threat of dangerous predators. Taken together, these predators created a landscape where danger came from every direction. To survive, Homo habilis had to constantly adjust their movements and remain alert to everything around them. They had to recognize danger and avoid it before it was too late. For Homo habilis, survival was rarely about escaping a single predator. It meant learning to recognize many different dangers, each demanding a different response, often within moments, and before there was time to make a second decision. Yet predators were only part of the challenge. Even close relatives may have added to that pressure. Paranthropus boisei, a robust hominin living in parts of East Africa, at the same time occupied many of the same woodlands and lakeside habitats. That meant they had to share the same habitats, food, and water resources. As a result, competition between the two species was likely unavoidable. That may be the most revealing truth about Homo habilis. For most of their existence, they were not the dominant predators in the ecosystem. It was one more vulnerable primate trying to avoid becoming another missed opportunity for a predator, and that changes the way we should think about the earliest humans. Perhaps the most important question is not how Homo habilis defeated its enemies, It is how a species that spent so much of its history as potential prey managed to survive long enough to change the course of human evolution. Because if they could not overpower the predators surrounding them, they would have needed something far more valuable than strength. If Homo habilis could not outrun predators or overpower larger rivals, survival would depend on finding an advantage that no claw or tooth could provide. What if the most important object in human history was not fire, the wheel, or agriculture, but an ordinary stone? A dry stream bed in East Africa offered little that seemed remarkable. Countless rocks lay scattered across the ground, shaped by water and time. To almost every animal that passed through, they were simply part of the landscape. But Homo habilis appears to have seen something different. Imagine a small group pausing beside the stream. One individual reaches towards several stones, turning them over one by one before selecting a single cobble. It is neither the largest nor the smoothest. Instead, it possesses qualities that are not immediately obvious: a dense structure, a predictable fracture pattern, and the ability to produce an exceptionally sharp edge when struck correctly. That moment represents something far more significant than picking up a rock. It represents a choice. Archaeologists now recognize this technological tradition as the Oldowan industry, the earliest widely accepted stone tool culture associated with the genus Homo. Dating back to about 2.5 million years ago, Oldowan tools appear at sites across East Africa and later spread into other regions as early humans expanded their range. The remarkable achievement was not simply the use of stone. Many animals have used objects in limited ways. Among them are chimpanzees, which use stones to crack open nuts, while sea otters use stones to open shellfish. Homo habilis went a step further. Instead of selecting a naturally sharp object, they deliberately changed the stone itself. That required recognizing that different rocks behave differently under impact. Materials such as basalt, quartzite, and other fine-grained volcanic rocks could produce durable cutting edges. Softer rocks often shattered unpredictably or failed to create useful flakes. Choosing the right raw material, therefore, became the first decision in the manufacturing process. The next challenge was even more demanding. Producing a useful cutting edge depended on striking the stone at an appropriate angle with carefully controlled force. Too little force might remove nothing. Too much could fracture the core in ways that made it unusable. Every successful flake reflected repeated practice rather than chance. The stone had not changed the landscape. It had changed the way Homo habilis interacted with it. Creating a tool often required thinking beyond the present moment. Suitable stone was not available everywhere. Groups may have returned repeatedly to locations where high-quality raw materials could be found. Some tools were carried away from the place where they were made, while partially used cores were sometimes retained for future use rather than discarded immediately. For the first time in human evolution, survival depended not only on what the body could do, but also on what the hands could create. For prehistoric humans, the Oldowan industry was far more than a collection of sharpened stones. It marked one of the earliest known moments when human intelligence began extending the abilities of the body through technology. From Acheulean hand axes and the controlled use of fire to agriculture and modern engineering, countless innovations would follow the same fundamental principle. When the body reached its limits, the mind could create a solution. The simple stone couldn't make Homo habilis stronger, but it made their life easier. For Homo habilis, the answer may not have been hunting large animals at all. Instead, they appear to have relied on opportunity. Imagine a lion pride finishing a meal before moving away. To most predators, little remained worth fighting over. But for Homo habilis, the carcass still held resources that others had overlooked. Approaching it was never without risk. Lions could return at any moment. Hyenas might already be nearby. Every extra minute beside a carcass increased the chance of being discovered. Timing mattered as much as courage. This was where Oldowan tools became truly valuable. Sharp stone flakes could slice through skin and connective tissue, allowing Homo habilis to remove scraps of meat that bare hands could not reach efficiently. More importantly, they could use hammer stones to break open long bones and reach the marrow sealed inside. Rich in fat and calories, bone marrow offered a concentrated source of energy, especially valuable in an environment where reliable meals were never guaranteed. Even a modest amount could make a meaningful difference for a small-bodied hominin living under constant environmental pressure. Archaeological discoveries support this picture. At several East African sites, fossil bones preserve both stone tool cut marks and carnivore tooth marks. In many cases, the evidence suggests that early hominins accessed carcasses after large predators had already fed, although the exact sequence likely varied from site to site. Scavenging, however, was only one part of a much broader strategy. Homo habilis probably exploited whatever resources the landscape provided. Fruits, seeds, roots, insects, small animals, and abandoned carcasses all became potential food sources. Rather than depending on a single type of meal, they adjusted their diet whenever conditions changed. That flexibility may have been one of their greatest advantages. In a landscape where rainfall, vegetation, and animal movements were constantly shifting, relying on only one food source would have been a dangerous strategy. A broad diet allowed Homo habilis to keep searching when one resource became scarce. Stone tools made that flexibility even more effective. They expanded the range of foods that could be processed and allowed early humans to extract nutrients that many other animals simply left behind. Homo habilis did not survive because they were stronger than every competitor around them. They survived because they recognized opportunities that others ignored. Over hundreds of thousands of years, those small advantages accumulated one successful meal, one more season, one more generation. But tools alone could not guarantee survival. Every new generation still had to learn how to use them. So how did that knowledge survive long after the individuals who first discovered it were gone? Finding food was only part of the challenge. The next generation still had to learn how to find it again. What happens when survival skills no longer disappear with the individual who discovered them? Imagine a young Homo habilis watching an older member of the group standing over a broken animal bone. The adult picks up a hammerstone, strikes the bone at just the right angle, and exposes the marrow hidden inside. The younger individual watches closely. No words are needed. No formal teaching exists. Yet something important has just happened. Knowledge has survived beyond the individual who first acquired it. This process is known as social learning, acquiring new skills by observing and copying others. It is not unique to humans. Chimpanzees learn to crack nuts, fish for termites, and use simple tools by watching experienced members of their communities. But evidence suggests that early members of the genus Homo may have relied on this process more consistently as survival became increasingly dependent on learned behavior rather than instinct alone. That simple shift may have marked the beginning of something resembling protoculture, the gradual accumulation of shared behaviors that existed beyond any single individual. These traditions were probably still fragile and limited compared with those of modern humans, but they represented a profound evolutionary change. Survival was becoming increasingly dependent on information stored not only in genes, but also in the memories and behaviors of the group. Passing on that information likely required more than simple imitation. Eye contact could direct another individual's attention toward an object. Hand movements might demonstrate how to strike a stone correctly. Simple vocal sounds or gestures may have helped maintain group coordination during foraging or warned others of approaching danger. None of this required fully developed language, yet together, these signals made learning faster and more reliable. Over time, this created a powerful feedback loop. Better tools allowed access to more nutritious food. Improved nutrition supported the energy demands of a gradually enlarging brain. A more capable brain could learn, remember, and refine increasingly complex behaviors, which in turn produced better tools and more effective survival strategies. Each improvement reinforced the next. For perhaps the first time in the history of prehistoric humans, information itself began changing more rapidly than genes. And that may have become one of humanity's greatest advantages. But if learning, cooperation, and technology gave Homo habilis such remarkable new possibilities, why did this species eventually disappear while other members of the human family continued the journey? Around 1.4 million years ago, Homo habilis gradually disappeared from the fossil record. By then, another member of the human family, Homo erectus, was becoming increasingly widespread across Africa. Taller, longer-legged, and better adapted for traveling across open landscapes, Homo erectus eventually occupied ecological niches that Homo habilis had once shared. But disappearance does not always mean failure. Evolution rarely follows a straight line from one species to the next. Instead, it resembles a branching bush with multiple human relatives existing at the same time. Different branches explored different solutions to the same challenges, while only some continued into the future. More importantly, Homo erectus did not begin from nothing. The Acheulean hand axe industry that appeared later was built upon a much older tradition of stone technology. Long before carefully shaped hand axes, there were the simple oldowan flakes used by Homo habilis. Those first tools became the foundation for every technological step that followed. Seen from that perspective, the story of Homo habilis did not end 1.4 million years ago. It simply continued through others. Oldowan led to Acheulean. Acheulean was followed by the controlled use of fire. Much later came agriculture, writing, metallurgy, steam engines, computers, the internet, and now artificial intelligence. Every one of those innovations traces its roots back to a simple idea, that the mind could create tools to overcome the limits of the body. Homo habilis was never the strongest member of the human family, nor was it the most intelligent, but it may have been among the first to turn learning, planning, and shared knowledge into a survival strategy. Perhaps that, more than anything else, is the reason their story is still part of ours. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of prehistoric humans, consider subscribing for more documentaries exploring the remarkable path of human evolution. And let us know in the comments, which ancient human ancestor should we explore next?